She's too weak to notice." Lydia whispered it as if I were deaf, as if 76 years of living had scraped away not Tulka my body, knowing my mind. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a cup of lukewarm tea, and kept my eyes lowered, pretending I hadn't heard a thing. Weak, blind, fading. That's what she thought of me, what they both thought. And maybe that's exactly why I finally noticed everything. It had started with a single line on my bank statement, so small, so harmless, a sum hardly worth attention. But when you've lived alone as long as I have, each dollar is like a breath. You feel when one goes missing, then another, and another. A quiet leak somewhere in the dark. I remember staring at that paper, my fingers trembling just slightly, not from age, but from a stirring I hadn't felt in years, a warning, a sharpness. Andrew came into the kitchen then, heavy steps, the familiar scent of cologne he wore to seem more important at work. 49 years old, but still my boy, my only child. "Mom, did you take your pills?" he asked without looking at me. Not a question of care, just routine, like checking the lock on a door. "I did," I said, raising my eyes. Lydia kept washing dishes with the aggression of someone scrubbing away guilt. "Well, good," Andrew muttered. "Just let us handle things. Less for you to worry about." Less for me to know, he meant. I kept nodding, smiling slightly, the way older women do when they're expected to fade into the wallpaper. But inside, something old and stubborn began to stretch, to straighten its back. I'd been many things in my life: wife, mother, caregiver, bookkeeper, for my late husband's tiny repair shop. I'd counted coins when they mattered and paid bills when they didn't. Weak? No, just quiet. Quiet long enough for people to mistake the stillness for frailty. After lunch, they drove me home, my home, though Lydia always called it the little house, as if minimizing it could shrink me with it. As soon as the door closed behind them, the silence pressed close around me. My house smelled of lavender and old books, things Lydia said I should declutter. I stood in that silence, looking at my worn-down rug, at the sunlight lying across the floor, and felt something rising, slow but sure. I walked to my desk, opened the drawer, spread the last 3 months of statements across the wood. The numbers stared back at me like small confessions. Multiple withdrawals. Electronic transfers I'd never signed for. A new automatic payment to an unfamiliar loan company. I slid my fingers over each line, reading them the way some women read tarot cards. Signs, patterns, a story told in numbers. And I saw very clearly that someone had been writing it for me. The strangest part? It didn't hurt. Not yet. It felt almost peaceful, like the moment before a storm breaks, when the air is heavy but clean, and you know exactly what will happen next. "They think I'm too weak to notice," I whispered to the empty room. But I noticed. Oh, I noticed everything. I gathered the papers into a neat stack, tied them with an old ribbon I found in the drawer, and set them aside. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'd go to the bank. Quietly, gently, as if I were just an old woman asking harmless questions. Tonight, I would rest. Tonight, I would let them believe I hadn't heard a thing, because a woman of my age doesn't raise her voice to fight. She waits. She watches. And then she acts, with the precision of someone who's been underestimated far too long. Andrew insisted I come over for Sunday lunch. Family time, he called it, though lately it felt more like an appointment I was required to keep. Lydia opened the door before I finished climbing the porch steps. She gave me that smile she offered to strangers at the grocery store, wide, polite, empty. There you are, she said, taking my elbow as if I were made of glass. Careful. These steps can be tricky at your age. I almost laughed. I'd climbed mountains with my late husband. Literal mountains. But I let her guide me, because letting people underestimate you is sometimes the most powerful choice you can make. Inside, their home gleamed with the kind of careful perfection that always made me feel out of place. White furniture no one sat on, matching vases no one touched, pictures arranged by color palette, not by memory. Sit here, Lydia instructed, pointing to a chair at the far end of the table. Away from the windows, away from the conversation. The place reserved for irrelevant people. I sat. Andrew joined us with 2 glasses of wine, for them, not for me. Mom, how are you feeling today? He asked, already distracted by his phone. I feel fine, I said. He nodded absently, as if I'd given the correct answer on a quiz. Lydia served the food with theatrical efficiency. I made the chicken soft, she announced loudly. Easy to chew. Didn't want you struggling. I lifted my eyes to hers. She looked away first. For most of the meal, they talked as if I weren't at the table, about a vacation they wanted to take, a car they wanted to buy, a problem with their mortgage rate. Every now and then, Lydia mentioned something about the house or when things settle with Mom's finances, as if my life were a pending investment. I kept eating slowly, quietly. When you've lived as long as I have, you learn that stillness is a kind of strength. But then Andrew said something that made the fork pause midway to my mouth. Maybe next year we can finally move forward with the remodel, he told Lydia. Once everything with Mom's estate is sorted. My estate. Sorted. As if I weren't sitting 6 feet away, alive and warm and breathing. Lydia glanced at me, then leaned closer to Andrew, whispering, but not quietly enough for my aging ears to miss. She won't question it. She barely understands half the papers she signs. I chewed my chicken slowly, deliberately, to hide the burn under my ribs. My hearing is just fine, I said pleasantly, placing my fork down. But your voice is Carrie. They both stiffened. Oh, Mom, we didn't mean, Andrew stammered. It's fine, I said. Eat. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable, but it was telling. After lunch, I excused myself to wash my hands. In their upstairs bathroom, I passed their office, its door half open. Inside on the desk lay a stack of printed emails. I didn't read them. I didn't need to. I saw enough in bold black letters. Loan authorization form pending approval automatic transfers. Renewal. My name was on the top of every page. My signature was on none of them. I walked back downstairs calmly, each step steady, measured. Lydia was clearing plates, Andrew wiping the table as if I were invisible. Thank you for the meal, I said softly. It was enlightening. They smiled uncertainly, unable to read my tone. Good. Let them squint in the dark for once. Outside, the sun seemed too bright after the dim politeness of their house. As Andrew helped me into my coat, I caught a glint of impatience in his eyes, as though caring for me were a chore, a burden he was too tired to carry. Drive safe, Lydia called from the doorway, waving sweetly. I walked down their steps, alone. Somewhere between their house and mine, a realization settled over me. Not like a blow, but like a key turning in a long-forgotten lock. They weren't just careless. They were planning something. Something that required me to stay quiet, confused, pliable. They thought I was an old woman losing her grip on reality. But I wasn't losing anything. I was gathering, and I had just started. Monday morning arrived cold and pale, the kind of morning that makes the bones complain before the mind catches up. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd once shelled peas with my husband and laid out the papers I'd tied with the ribbon. They looked small and harmless, like receipts from an ordinary life. But I knew better. Ordinary things become dangerous when someone thinks you're too old to see them. I placed the bundle in my handbag, put on my coat, and walked to the bus stop. Andrew always insisted on driving me for safety, which really meant for control. Today I wanted neither. The bank lobby smelled of polished wood and cold air. A young teller with perfect hair smiled too brightly, the way people smile at the elderly when they assume we're confused before we've said a word. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale. How can I help you today?" I set my bag on the counter. "I'd like to review my recent transactions." Slowly, line by line. She blinked, still smiling. "Of course. Do you have concerns?" I wouldn't ask if I didn't. Something in my voice made her straighten. Not fear, just respect. Respect I hadn't heard from my own son in years. She guided me to a small desk. I watched her fingers dance across the keyboard, watched the faint crease appear between her brows. "There are a number of automatic payments here," she murmured. "Many marked as authorized by you." "I see," I said. "I'd like copies." She printed them one after another, the pages stacking like silent testimony. My name appeared again and again, neatly typed, falsely signed. Lydia's name never appeared, but I recognized her handwriting in the memo lines, that arrogant swirl on the Y. Then came the final blow, a monthly transfer to a credit union loan I'd never taken. "This loan," I asked softly, "when was it opened?" She clicked, scanned. "4 months ago, with your digital authorization." "I don't own a computer," the teller swallowed. I didn't raise my voice. "Women of my age don't need to. Truth, spoken gently, is sharper than any blade. Print every document, dear, every signature, every date." When she finished, she hesitated. "Mrs. Hale, would you like to place a temporary freeze on your account?" Not yet, I thought. Not before I understood the full extent of the rot. "No," I said aloud. "Not today, but soon." I placed each page into my handbag as delicately as if I were packing glass. The teller watched me with growing concern, perhaps imagining some family storm behind my composed face. Outside, the wind was colder. The bus was late. My hands felt stiff, but my mind felt clearer than it had in years. At home, I spread the new documents beside the old ones. The picture sharpened with every page. Unauthorized transfers, signatures that weren't mine, payments disguised as household support, loan balances swelling like bruises. They'd taken from me slowly, small amounts first, then larger, carefully spaced so the pattern wouldn't alarm someone too weak to notice. I sat down on the edge of my bed. The room felt different suddenly, not smaller, but steadier, as if the walls themselves had shifted their weight. I thought about Andrew as a boy, hands sticky with jam, climbing into my lap, trusting me to guide him through his fears. I thought about the woman he married, smiling, brittle, always looking over my shoulder, as if I were a piece of outdated furniture. And then I thought about the phrase I'd overheard, the whisper that started everything. "She's too weak to notice." I closed the folder, tied the ribbon again, and rested my palms on the fabric. Weakness wasn't the danger. Assuming it, that was. Tomorrow, I decided, would not be a day for family. Tomorrow would be a day for answers. Emily showed up at my door the next afternoon without calling first. She always did that, arriving like a warm breeze, unannounced but never unwelcome. At 22, she had her mother's soft-spoken manner, but none of Lydia's sharp edges. She carried a backpack and a carton of berries. "Grandma," she said, stepping inside and brushing her cold cheeks with her gloves, "you didn't answer my text. I thought maybe your phone died again." I smiled faintly. It didn't die. I just needed silence. Emily's eyes warmed with concern, the kind that comes from love, not obligation. She helped me take off my coat, then followed me into the kitchen, where I set the kettle on the stove. For a few minutes, we didn't speak. The quiet settled comfortably between us. She never rushed me. She never had to. Finally, she leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Dad said you seemed off at Sunday lunch. Did something happen?" How carefully she asked. How different from her father, who asked questions only when he needed something. I folded my hands in my lap. "Do you think I'm getting forgetful, Emily?" Her brow tightened. "Why would you say that?" "Because your father and Lydia treat me as if I can't manage my own thoughts anymore." Her cheeks flushed with indignation. "Well, they shouldn't. You're still sharper than both of them combined." I chuckled softly, though the sound felt sad even to me. "My memory is fine. My hearing is fine. My mind is fine." I paused. "But I've noticed. Something isn't." Emily straightened. "What do you mean?" I reached for my handbag and pulled out the bundle tied with the ribbon. I didn't open it, just laid it between us. Its weight felt heavier today. "Emily," I said quietly, "money has been disappearing from my accounts." She blinked once, then again, slowly. "Disappearing how?" "Small withdrawals at first, then larger ones. A loan I don't recognize. Automatic payments I never set up." My voice stayed calm, steady as winter sunlight, and signatures on documents I never signed. Emily stared at the bundle. "Dad?" she whispered, not accusing, hurt, deeply hurt. "I don't know," I said gently. "Not yet, and I will not assume, but I intend to find out." She lifted her eyes to me, wide and glistening. "Grandma, why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because people like me," I said, touching her hand. "Women my age. We learn to keep quiet. To stay small so we're not a burden, and sometimes that quiet becomes a trap." Emily shook her head fiercely. "You're not small, and you're not a burden." "I know that now," I said. But I needed time to see things clearly. Silence again, but not comfortable this time. Emily pushed the berries aside, reached for the ribbon, then stopped. "Can I look?" "Yes," I said. "You can." She untied it carefully, as if the papers might crumble. One by one, she read the pages, her face tightening with every line. When she reached the forged signature, her breath caught. "Grandma." She pressed her palm to her mouth. This is awful." I rested my hand on hers. "Do not cry for me. I am not broken." Her shoulders shook anyway. "Listen to me," I said softly. "I needed to tell someone I trust. Someone who sees me, not what they expect me to be. And that person is you." Emily wiped her eyes, nodding hard. "So, what are you going to do?" "Something your father never expects." I exhaled slowly. "I'm going to bring in help. Quiet help. A professional." "A lawyer?" Emily asked. "No," I said. "Not yet." My voice lowered, steadier with purpose. "I need an auditor." Emily leaned back, stunned. Then, slowly, an almost mischievous smile touched her lips. "Oh," she breathed. "They're not going to like that." "No," I said. "They won't. But I'm done being the woman they think I am." The kettle whistled. sharp and sudden, breaking the heavy quiet. I stood up, poured the tea, and felt, for the first time in months, solid, prepared, awake. I hadn't planned to visit Andrew and Lydia again so soon, but some things in life don't wait for the polite moment. The afternoon was gray and sharp, the kind of weather that presses on the joints and the heart alike. I walked slowly up their driveway, refusing to let the cold push me back. Lydia opened the door before I knocked. She always seemed to appear too quickly, as though watching from behind the curtain. "Oh," she said, plastering on a smile. "Margaret, we weren't expecting you." "I know," I replied, stepping inside without waiting for her invitation. "I came for a brief visit." Andrew was in the living room, laptop open on the coffee table. He looked up, startled. "Mom? Is everything all right?" "Perfectly," I said, taking off my gloves one finger at a time. "I just wanted to see how you two were doing." Lydia blinked, slow, cautious, like someone preparing to defend territory. Andrew shut his computer a little too quickly. "We're fine," he said. "Busy. Lots going on." "Yes," I murmured. "I can imagine." We moved to the dining table. Lydia offered tea in a tone that suggested she hoped I'd decline. I accepted. She returned with a cup so full it nearly spilled, careless or perhaps intentional. I steadied it myself because I always have. They exchanged glances. Nervous? Irritated? Afraid of what I might know? I watched them quietly, seeing all the things age had taught me to notice. The twitch of Andrew's jaw, the tightening of Lydia's fingers around her napkin, the faint tremor in their silence. Finally, Lydia sighed dramatically. "Margaret, if this is about Sunday—" "It isn't," I interrupted. She looked disappointed. Andrew looked confused. I leaned back in the chair. "But I have been thinking lately about life, about what matters, about how people treat each other when no one is watching." Lydia's lips pressed into a thin, irritated line. Andrew forced a laugh. "Mom, you're not upset about anything, are you? You've seemed sensitive lately." "Sensitive," I repeated as if tasting the word. "No. Observant, perhaps." Lydia rolled her eyes. Not openly, but enough for me to see. "Margaret, we've been doing everything we can for you. Sometimes it's just hard to manage. Everything." There it was. The same soft, poisonous condescension she always used. The tone that said, "You're lucky we put up with you." I set my cup down carefully. "You know," I said, "people often reveal themselves in small ways." Lydia crossed her arms. "Meaning?" "Meaning," I answered. "You said something the other day. Something about weakness." Her face stilled. Andrew's eyes flicked to hers. "I don't remember," Lydia said lightly. Too lightly. "I do," I replied. "I remember every word." She shifted back, trying to reclaim control. "Margaret, you're overthinking. You shouldn't take things so seriously. We're all under pressure. The mortgage, the loan, the—" Andrew cut in sharply. "Lydia!" A warning. And there. That single word. That tiny, panicked look. That was when I knew. I didn't merely suspect anymore. I knew. They had secrets. Secrets they feared I'd stumbled upon. Secrets heavy enough to make even Andrew pale. I folded my hands neatly. "I'm glad you're both doing well," I said softly. "Truly. You deserve a comfortable life." They relaxed, just slightly, mistaking kindness for surrender. But inside me, something tightened, something long sleeping, finally waking fully. I stood. "I won't keep you any longer." Andrew exhaled in relief. Lydia smiled as if she'd won something. At the door, I paused. "One more thing." They looked up. "You should know I value honesty." especially now. Lydia laughed, brittle. We're always honest with you. I nodded slowly. Good. Let's hope it stays that way. Their expressions faltered, briefly, but enough. Outside, the cold bit at my face, but my steps felt steadier than they had in years. Behind their curtain, I saw Lydia move quickly toward Andrew, her voice sharp and low, though I couldn't hear the words. I didn't need to. Because the moment she whispered them, I saw Andrew's hand lift to his forehead, the gesture of a man who knows the quiet is over. The pretending is over. The old woman they dismissed is no longer harmless, and somewhere deep inside, a line had been crossed. Cleanly, quietly, irreversibly. Tomorrow, I decided, would not be about feelings. Tomorrow would be strategy. Arthur Wynne hadn't changed much in the last 20 years. His hair had thinned, his shoulders rounded, and he walked with a careful, deliberate step. But the sharpness in his eyes was the same. That sharpness was why I chose him. He greeted me in his small office with a warmth I hadn't felt from my own son in years. Margaret Hale, he said, shaking my hand. You look steady. People usually come to me when they're falling apart. I did that already, I answered. Now I'm reorganizing. Arthur gave a low, knowing chuckle and gestured for me to sit. The place smelled of old paper and something earthy. Cigars, probably, though he pretended he'd quit. Well then, he said, leaning back in his chair, tell me what brings you. I placed the ribbon-tied bundle on the desk. He reached for it, but I kept my hand on the top for a moment. A reflex, an instinct. My life had been brushed aside so easily lately that I needed this one slow second of control. I think someone has been taking money from me, I said quietly. Not obviously, not all at once, but enough that you'd notice if you knew how to look. Arthur nodded once. And you know how to look? I used to, I said. Before people decided I shouldn't anymore. He understood without needing details. That had always been his gift. I lifted my hand. He untied the ribbon carefully, almost ceremoniously, and began to examine the documents. His expression changed gradually. First a raised eyebrow, then a small frown, then a tightening around the mouth. When he reached the forged signature, he froze entirely. Margaret, he said, voice low, this is textbook financial exploitation. I suspected, I murmured. Suspected? He tapped the stack sharply. This isn't suspicion. These are unauthorized withdrawals, predatory loans, forged approvals, and manipulation of access. This is deliberate. I didn't flinch. I'd had enough time to become numb to betrayal. Arthur studied me for a moment. Does your son know? No, I said. Not yet. And his wife? A pause. Then I answered, she knows something, or she knows everything. Arthur sighed, rubbing his forehead. This is serious, Margaret. You can go to the police. I'm not ready for police, I said. I want clarity first. Control first. I want to see their faces when they realize I am not quite as fragile as they hoped. Arthur blinked, amused, impressed. You're asking for an audit. I am. You're asking for me. I am. And what exactly do you want me to do? I folded my hands in my lap. I want you to come to dinner. His eyebrows shot up. Dinner? Yes, I said calmly. A family dinner. At my house. This Sunday. Nothing dramatic. Nothing loud. Just presents. Presents? You will bring your briefcase. You will bring your questions. You will bring your professional eyes. And you will sit at my table as if you were an old friend checking on an old woman. Arthur considered this, then nodded slowly. And while we eat, I'll go through the documents with them. Yes. And ask for clarification. Yes. And watch them sweat. I smiled. Small, steady. Yes. He leaned back again, hands folded. Margaret, you understand this won't be pleasant? Pleasant is overrated, I said. I want honesty. I want responsibility. I want the truth spoken out loud in front of me, not whispered behind my back. And you don't want to fight? No. Fights are noisy. I want something quieter, something they can't call hysteria or confusion. Arthur's eyes softened. You're doing this with dignity. I'm doing it with necessity. He gathered the papers again, aligning them with the precision only a man who lived inside details could manage. Then Sunday it is. I stood slowly. My joints complained, but I ignored them. I had ignored worse. At the door, Arthur stopped me with one more question. Margaret, when did you realize something was wrong? I looked at him, steady as stone. When someone assumes you're weak, I said, you notice every movement around you. And when someone assumes you're blind, you start to see more clearly than ever. Arthur nodded once, firm, respectful. I'll be there at 1. As I stepped outside into the cold afternoon, the wind cut through my coat, but my spine held straight. Sunday would be the beginning, and they had no idea. I woke before sunrise on Sunday, long before the house warmed, long before the birds began their thin winter singing. Age has its inconveniences, yes, but it also gives you mornings like this, quiet as breath, when the world hasn't yet decided what it wants from you. Today, it wanted truth, and I was ready. I moved slowly, not from weakness, but from intention. I washed my face, brushed my thinning silver hair, and pinned it the way my husband used to like, pulled back, neat, showing the line of my cheek. At 76, there is still dignity in a woman's appearance, and I wanted mine to speak before I said a word. The kitchen felt colder than usual, but the familiar motions warmed me, peeling carrots, cutting onions, trimming chicken the way my mother once taught me. My hands remembered even when the joints protested. I cooked not out of affection, no, that had worn thin, but because it was important the table looked like any other family meal. Normal, ordinary, harmless. Let them walk into comfort. Let them sit in it. Let the rug feel soft beneath their feet before it is pulled out from under them. Around 10, I set the table. I chose the good china, not because Andrew or Lydia deserved it, but because I deserved a table that reflected my worth, even if they had forgotten it. I polished the silver with slow, careful strokes. By noon, the house smelled of rosemary and butter. I stood in the dining room doorway, looking at the table I had prepared. Something settled inside me. Not pride, not fear, more like readiness. A woman who has survived decades of life knows when the moment has come. At 12:15, my phone buzzed. Emily, Grandma, do you want me there today? I can come early. I smiled. Sweet girl. Always offering support without knowing the full weight of the situation. Me, no, my dear, not today. I need to do this myself. She didn't argue. She simply sent a heart. That small gesture steadied me more than she could ever know. At 12:40, I saw Arthur turn onto my street through the window. His car was old, but well kept, much like the man himself. He stepped out, carrying his briefcase as if it were a part of him. When he reached my porch, he touched my arm lightly. You look strong, he said. I feel clear, I answered. That's enough. Inside, he surveyed the table with a small nod. You've set the stage perfectly. I didn't set a stage. I said softly. I said a home. The stage belongs to them. Arthur placed his briefcase beside the chair where he would sit. Near enough to reach, but not imposing. His instincts were still sharp. At 12:58, I heard Andrew's car. Lydia's laugh, too loud, always too loud, floated up the walkway. They walked in without knocking, as if the house were already theirs. "Mother," Andrew said, kissing my cheek mechanically. "Smells good in here." Lydia looked around approvingly. "Oh, you really went all out, didn't you? That's sweet." Sweet. A word used on children and pets, not on women who raised whole lives from nothing. "And who is this?" Lydia asked as soon as she saw Arthur, her voice tightening like a drawstring. "I didn't know we'd have company." Arthur stood. "Arthur Wynne, a longtime friend." Her smile faltered at the edges. "Ah, I see." Andrew shifted, uncomfortable. "Mom, you could have told us someone else would be here." "Oh," I said gently. "I thought it would be a nice surprise." They exchanged looks, the kind people share when they think they're about to be inconvenienced. Good, I thought. Let them start the meal with exactly the amount of comfort they've earned. We all sat. The first few minutes were filled with small talk, forced and brittle. Lydia commented on my curtains. Andrew complained about traffic. Arthur listened without a single note of judgment, his hands folded calmly. When the food was served and the plates were full, Arthur cleared his throat. "Margaret," he said warmly, "did you want to show them those papers we discussed?" Lydia's fork froze. Andrew's head snapped up. And in the stillness that followed, I felt something inside me settle into place. Not triumph, not revenge, but the firmness of a woman reclaiming her name. "Yes," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "I believe today is the right time." I could feel it the moment the air changed. It happens in certain rooms, at certain tables, when the truth is preparing to stand up and make itself heard. The temperature drops a little. People straighten without knowing why. A quiet comes over everything, dense as wool. Andrew glanced at Lydia. Lydia glanced at Andrew. Arthur opened his briefcase with the slow confidence of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. I folded my napkin in my lap and let the moment breathe. "Mom," Andrew said, trying for casual. "What papers is he talking about?" "Oh, nothing complicated," I replied, gently nudging the plate of chicken toward him. "Just a few things I wanted clarity on. I thought it best to discuss them together." Arthur laid the first document on the table as neatly as a dealer setting down a card. The simple, unremarkable paper looked suddenly sharp, almost dangerous. Lydia leaned forward. "What is that?" "A record," Arthur answered pleasantly, "of a loan opened 4 months ago in Margaret's name." Andrew stiffened. Lydia blinked twice. Fast. Her tell. She didn't even know she did it. "That loan wasn't hers," Andrew said quickly. "Mom, didn't we talk about this?" No," I said softly. "We didn't talk about it." Arthur slid the next sheet forward. "And this one notes the digital authorization," he said. "Except Mrs. Hale does not own a computer." Lydia's smile snapped into place like armor. "You must be mistaken. These things happen. Some clerk probably clicked something wrong." Arthur smiled back, just as politely. "Possible, but unlikely. Especially when the signature on the authorization resembles yours, Mrs. Hale. Your handwriting on the grocery list I saw by the sink." Lydia's face drained of color. "Excuse me?" Andrew shot her a look sharp enough to cut lace. I sat perfectly still. Arthur continued, not hurried, not dramatic, just methodical. "Then there are the automatic withdrawals, over 30 of them. Interesting pattern. Always on the 3rd or 17th. Always routed to an account belonging to a household other than Margaret's. He placed the final stack neatly in front of me. My hands did not shake when I touched it. Lydia swallowed hard. "Are you accusing us of something?" Arthur didn't answer. He didn't need to. Andrew leaned back, crossing his arms, a defensive posture he'd had since childhood. "Mom," he said slowly, "why didn't you come to me? You're confused about these transactions." "I'm not confused," I replied. My voice felt like a thin wire pulled tight. "I noticed." The silence that followed pressed thickly against the walls. Lydia opened her mouth, then closed it again, as if tasting the bitterness of the moment. I turned to Arthur. "Would you explain the last part?" He nodded and pulled out the sheet I had not yet shown Andrew and Lydia. "This," he said, "is a forged signature." Lydia made a small, sharp sound, more a choke than a word. Andrew's face went completely still. "That's not... Mom, that's not your signature. It looks all wrong." "It should," I said. "I did not sign it." Lydia jumped in too quickly. "Margaret, maybe you don't remember signing." "I remember," I said. 3 words. Soft, precise, undeniable. I watched them both. Really watched them. The way Andrew's throat tightened. The way Lydia's fingers picked at the edge of her napkin as if trying to peel away the truth itself. Arthur sat back, letting the weight of the document speak. That was his way. Never forcing the confession, only laying out the path and letting people walk themselves into the light or the ruin. "Margaret wanted transparency," he said calmly. "Nothing more." Lydia's voice cracked. "We've only ever tried to help her." I lifted my eyes to hers. "Help doesn't hide. Help doesn't take. Help doesn't lie." Andrew inhaled sharply, almost a gasp. I reached for my water glass with steady fingers, took a sip, set it back down. Then I said, in the same gentle voice I used on Andrew when he was a boy refusing to tell me the truth about a broken window, "Well, my loves, I think it's time we stop pretending." The room didn't breathe. Not Lydia. Not Andrew. Not even me. This was the moment they finally understood. I had come prepared. I had come aware. I had come awake. And I was not done. Arthur's presence at my table changed the entire shape of the room. I could feel it in the way Andrew shifted in his chair, shoulders drawn tight, jaw clenched, as if a man with a briefcase was more threatening than any raised voice could ever be. Lydia, on the other hand, grew strangely still. Stillness in her meant calculation. Arthur rested his folded hands on the table. "I'm not here to accuse," he said gently. "I'm here to clarify." Clarify. A soft word, but I saw Lydia flinch. Andrew cleared his throat. "Mom, I think we should talk alone. This isn't appropriate." "No," I said quietly. "It is exactly appropriate." My tone stopped him the way a hand on a child's shoulder does. Not forceful, just final. Arthur opened another file. "These withdrawals began 14 months ago, consistently, deliberately." He tapped the page, and the faint sound, paper against wood, felt like a drumbeat. Lydia leaned forward. "Margaret, honey, if money went missing, you should have come to us first, not him." "Why?" I asked. "Because you already knew where it went." Her face paled. Andrew snapped his gaze to her so fast the air seemed to crack. I mean," Lydia stuttered, then straightened, smoothing her blouse. "We helped with grocery deliveries, with the gardener, with home maintenance. Maybe the bank logged something wrong." Arthur stayed calm, but the skin around his eyes tightened. The transfers were labeled household assistance for caregiver expenses, but Mrs. Hale has no caregiver. Andrew shifted again. Maybe the bank mislabeled. It was your account number, Arthur said quietly. The silence that followed was thick, like syrup slowing the air. I looked at my son, my boy who once scraped his knees climbing the oak tree out front, who used to run to me when thunder frightened him. His eyes were fixed on the table now, hands clasped too tightly, knuckles white. "Mom," he whispered. I didn't realize what Lydia was. Lydia's head jerked, fury flooding her face. "Don't you dare put this on me." Arthur raised a hand, not to silence them, but to contain the rising heat in the room. "Let's stay with the facts." Facts. The sharpest, cleanest blade. He turned another page. This signature, attempting to authorize access to Mrs. Hale's investment account, was submitted last month. Andrew stared. That's not her writing." "It isn't," Arthur agreed. Lydia opened her mouth, then shut it again, her defiance collapsing into something rawer. Fear, maybe, or the realization that she'd underestimated the one person she shouldn't have. My voice came out calm. "I don't want explanations. I don't want stories. I don't want rehearsed apologies." Andrew's eyes lifted to mine, glassy and stunned. "What do you want?" he asked. I folded my napkin, every motion deliberate. "Truth," I said, plain and spoken aloud, not whispered in kitchens, not hidden in paperwork. Lydia swallowed. "Margaret, let's not turn this into a scene." I gave her a small, almost affectionate smile. "My dear, there is no scene, just illumination." Arthur closed the folder. The sound was soft but final. "Mrs. Hale has decisions to make," he said gently, "but not today, and not in a rush." Andrew looked between us, at me, at Arthur, at the documents. Something in his face crumbled, not from guilt alone, but from the sudden realization that the ground beneath him had shifted, and I had shifted it myself. Lydia pushed her chair back abruptly. "I need air." She left the room in a fury of perfume and sharp footsteps. Andrew stayed seated, shoulders slumped, a man who no longer knew where to place his hands. And I felt steady, not triumphant, not vengeful, just steady, like a door finally closed after years of being left ajar. The truth was on the table now, and I would decide the rest. Lydia didn't come back right away. Her footsteps faded down the hallway. Then the faint slam of the bathroom door followed. Andrew winced at the sound, rubbing his temples as if the noise itself injured him. Arthur waited, hands folded, patient as stone. I reached for my water glass but didn't drink. My fingers simply rested against the cool surface, grounding me. "Let's continue," I said quietly. Andrew looked at me with a kind of stunned disbelief. Not anger, confusion, as if he couldn't quite reconcile the mother he thought he had with the woman sitting in front of him now. "Mom," he said slowly, "I don't understand why you're doing this here. Why today?" "Because you never would have listened another day," I answered. He swallowed. "You could have talked to me alone." "I did," I reminded him gently, "for years." Arthur slid another document forward. "This one shows a request to change the primary contact on your mother's accounts to your number, twice." Andrew stared at it, his mouth parting. "I didn't send that. Lydia handles email. She probably thought—" "Yes," I murmured. "She often thinks." He winced. Arthur didn't push the issue. He simply placed the papers in a neat line, one after another. The unauthorized loan, the disguised withdrawals, the forged signature, the attempt to gain control of my investments, the shift in account contact information. Each page felt like a quiet stone laid into a path, one they had built themselves, step by step. Andrew shot a helpless glance toward the hallway. I had no idea she'd gone this far. That alone, I said, is its own concern. He looked at me sharply. You're saying it's my fault? I'm saying, I replied, keeping my voice steady, that the moment you let someone speak for you, they begin to act for you. Andrew's jaw trembled, barely perceptible. Mom, I would never hurt you. No, I said softly. You just stopped seeing me. Arthur coughed lightly, not from discomfort, but to draw Andrew's attention. Mr. Hale, this situation can still be corrected. Transparency is the first step, but your mother needs an honest answer to a simple question. Andrew looked up, exhausted. What question? I lifted the forged signature between two fingers. Did you give Lydia permission to handle my accounts? His mouth opened, but no words came out. Honesty is hardest when it strips away the story you've been telling yourself. I didn't think she was doing anything wrong, he said finally. I thought she was helping you, helping us. She said you weren't keeping up with your finances anymore. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Did you verify that? No, Andrew whispered. And the loan in her name? Arthur asked. Andrew shook his head, face crumpling. She told me it was for home repairs. I nodded once. I see. He leaned forward, voice cracking. Mom, I swear, I didn't know. I didn't mean intent, I said, is not the same thing as attention. And you gave her all of yours, at the cost of mine. Before he could respond, Lydia returned, pale, chin lifted sharply, eyes red but defiant. She sat down as if bracing herself for impact. I'm done with this, she announced. You're making a spectacle out of nothing. Margaret, you know you get confused. This man is twisting things. Arthur leaned back, almost amused by her bravado. Mrs. Hale asked for clarity, and she's getting it. Lydia's gaze darted to Andrew, seeking backup, an ally, a shield. She didn't find one. He wouldn't look at her. Just like that, the balance in the room shifted. The woman who had controlled every conversation for years suddenly realized she had lost this one before it began. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I simply said, Lydia, dear, tell me the truth now. Not the softened version, not the practiced one, the real one. Her lip curled. You're accusing me of stealing. No, I said. I'm asking whether you thought I wouldn't notice. Her silence was louder than any confession. Andrew closed his eyes, and I knew, whether he admitted it or not, he had heard the answer. Inside me, something warm uncoiled, not triumph, relief, final and deep. The truth was no longer hiding in whispers. It was sitting at my table, in the open, waiting for what I would do next. And I knew exactly what that would be. For a long moment, no one moved. The house seemed to hold its breath, the way it does before a storm breaks, not with thunder, but with truth finally stepping into the room. Arthur placed the last stack of papers in front of him, aligning the corners with calm deliberation. We're not here to argue, he said, his tone level. We're here to clarify responsibility. Lydia scoffed. Responsibility? Please. Margaret, your memory slips all the time. You forget things, misplace things. You've been overwhelmed. We were helping you. Helping. They loved that word. It sounded so kind while hiding so much ugliness. I folded my hands on the table. They looked older today. Veins raised, skin thinning, but they did not tremble. "Lydia," I said gently, "I forget where I put my reading glasses. I do not forget signing away thousands of dollars." Andrew flinched as if the words struck him directly. Arthur opened one document and slid it forward. "Let's discuss this transaction. A recurring withdrawal of $400 every 2 weeks. Mrs. Hale did not authorize it." Lydia's jaw set. "I set that up because we were covering expenses. Extra groceries, medication, home repairs." I cut her off with a soft nod. "Did you tell me?" "Well, no. But I shouldn't have to explain every detail. We're family." Family. Another word they kept polishing until it gleamed. Andrew's voice, when it came, was quiet. "Lydia, $400 every 2 weeks? That's not groceries." She turned on him with a sharp glare. "You knew about the mortgage. You knew we needed help. So you took it," I said, without asking. "We deserved it." Lydia's voice cracked, higher now, threads breaking. "After everything we've done for you, driving you around, checking on your medicine, making sure you don't fall or wander off." I lifted my eyes slowly, intentionally. "Lydia, I am 76. I am not wandering anywhere." Arthur cleared his throat. "And according to Mrs. Hale's physician, whom I contacted with her permission, she is in full cognitive health." Lydia's breath hitched. Andrew leaned back, face collapsing in shame. "You told me she was declining." Lydia stiffened. I thought she was. She repeats things sometimes. She asks the same questions." I gave her a small, pitying smile. "Yes. When I ask how you're spending my money and you avoid the answer, I do tend to repeat myself." Arthur placed another sheet on the table. "These purchases, luxury items, spa packages, high-end electronics, none appear to be for Mrs. Hale." Lydia's eyes darted, mind scrambling for a lie that wouldn't sound like one. "She told me I could," she blurted. "No," I said. "I did not." Her shoulders sank. I turned to Andrew, my son, my boy, the man I taught to tie his shoes, to apologize properly, to tell the truth, because truth stays when everything else falls apart. "Andrew," I said softly, "did you know about any of this?" His throat worked. Words wouldn't come, not easily. But finally, "No, I didn't. I swear I didn't." "And if you had?" I asked. He shut his eyes. I don't know." That was the most honest thing he'd said all day. Arthur leaned forward slightly, his presence grounding the room. "Mrs. Hale, you asked me to bring clarity. We have it now. The question is what you want to do with it." Lydia's eyes widened in panic. "Margaret, you're not going to ruin our lives over this. It was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," I repeated. "That lasted over a year." "We can fix it," she insisted, voice trembling. "We'll pay it back. All of it. Every dollar. Just don't make this ugly." I sat back, breath slow, steady, deliberate. "This isn't ugly," I said. "Not yet." Andrew looked at me with something like dread. "Mom, what happens now?" My answer came quietly, without hesitation, as natural as drawing breath. "Now," I said, "I take back what is mine." And the room, our shared room, our shared history, shifted. Finally, undeniably, toward me. Lydia was the first to speak again, though speak is too gentle a word for the sound that left her. It was thin, strained, like something pulled too tight. "Margaret, please. You don't understand how much pressure we've been under." Pressure. They always had a word ready to soften whatever they'd done. I rested my palms on the table. Pressure doesn't give permission. Arthur didn't interrupt. He simply observed. He had a talent for letting silence work on people like a slow, steady tide. Andrew dropped his head into his hands. "This is a disaster." "Not a disaster," I corrected softly. "A revelation." Lydia pushed her chair back and stood, too quickly, as if motion could change truth. "Fine. I made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. You should have come to us, Margaret. You blindsided us." I raised my eyebrows just a little. "Did I? Or did you blindside yourselves when you assumed I wouldn't notice?" Her lips parted, then closed again. She had no answer that didn't confess everything. Arthur set his pen down with a small click. "Mrs. Hale has shown considerable restraint. She asked for no confrontation, only understanding." Lydia scoffed again. "Understanding?" "She brought an auditor to lunch." "Auditors deal in facts," I said, "not stories." Her face twisted. "You're trying to humiliate us." "No," I replied. "Humiliation is loud. This is quiet. Quiet truth. Quiet consequences." Andrew finally lifted his face. His eyes were wet, not tears, but a sheen of shock and shame. "Mom, I don't even know where to start." "Start," I said gently, "by listening, not defending. Listening." He nodded, defeated. Arthur opened one final folder. "Mrs. Hale asked me to review her estate documents, her account access, and any authorizations tied to her home." Lydia's head snapped in my direction. "Estate? Home? What are you planning?" "I am planning," I said, "to protect myself." "You don't need protection from us," Lydia insisted, but her voice broke on the last word. Arthur continued, undeterred. "As it stands, Andrew is listed as a secondary contact and emergency decision-maker. Mrs. Hale has the right to change that at any time." Andrew froze. "Mom, are you removing me?" I met his eyes, steady, unblinking. "I am removing your access. Not my love, but your access." Lydia let out a sharp breath, more of a hiss than a sigh. "You're going to turn Emily against us too, aren't you?" "She turned herself," I said quietly, "by telling the truth when you would not." That hit its mark. Lydia sank back into her chair, as if something inside her had finally, irreversibly cracked. Andrew rubbed his forehead. "Mom, I swear I never meant—" "I know," I said, "but neglect is not innocence." The words hung between us. Heavy. True. Arthur folded his hands again. "Mrs. Hale has already asked me to prepare documentation, account freezes, revoked authorizations, a full audit summary." Lydia went pale. "You're destroying our family." "No," I said softly. "I am restoring myself." Her eyes filled, not with remorse, but with fear. The kind of fear that comes when consequences finally arrive wearing your own name. Andrew whispered, "Mom, what do you want from us?" I took a slow breath, letting the truth settle before speaking it aloud. "I want honesty," I said. "Not one more lie, not one more whisper behind my back. And after that, I want distance, enough distance for me to breathe." Lydia reached for Andrew's arm. He didn't move toward her. Not this time. Arthur closed his briefcase with quiet finality. "The next steps will be simple," he said. Yes. For the first time in a long time, the next steps were mine. Arthur's briefcase clicked shut with a sound that felt strangely like a door closing behind everything I had tolerated for far too long. Andrew sat motionless, shoulders rounded not from anger, but from the sudden collapse of the story he'd been telling himself for years, that he was the protector, the responsible one, the son who always meant well. Lydia looked smaller too, though not humbled. No. Her smallness came from fear, the brittle kind that makes a person lash out or fall apart. She hadn't decided which yet. I was the one who broke the silence. "I've made my decision," I said calmly. Andrew lifted his head, eyes red, jaw tight. "Mom, whatever it is, please don't do anything drastic." "Drastic?" I echoed softly. "No, drastic would have been pretending I didn't see what you both were doing." Lydia's mouth twisted. "We didn't do anything." "Enough," I said quietly. The word wasn't loud, yet it cut cleanly through her protest. "No more small lies." Arthur placed a single sheet in front of me. "This," he said, tapping the page, "is the document revoking all financial access for both Andrew and Lydia. Completely legal. Immediate upon signature." Lydia inhaled sharply. "What?" "You can't, Margaret, you can't do that. How are we supposed to help you?" "I will hire help," I said. "Help that doesn't come with hidden charges." Andrew flinched. Arthur continued gently. "She can designate a new trusted contact if she chooses." Andrew swallowed, voice hoarse. "Mom, are you choosing Emily?" I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the disappointment in himself, the shame, the fear of losing whatever piece of me he still believed belonged to him. But I also saw the boy he'd once been, the boy who had trusted me. "Emily," I said, "has earned trust by offering care without taking anything. She is my new contact." The words didn't tremble, not even a little. Lydia let out a shaking breath. "So that's it? You're giving everything to her?" "No," I said. "I am giving control to her. Not inheritance, not money. Control of communication. Access to nothing except honesty." She scoffed. "And what about us? What are we supposed to be?" "You," I said softly, "are adults. You will manage on your own." Andrew pressed his palms together. "Mom, please, I can fix this." "Can you?" I asked. "Or can you only regret being caught?" His face cracked. Pain, guilt, something sincere finally surfacing. But sincerity is not the same as responsibility. I waited for Arthur to speak again. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "this second document allows you to establish a protected account. Only you and the person you designate can access it." "And that person," Lydia snapped, "is Emily." "That person," Arthur corrected, "is whoever Mrs. Hale chooses." I took the pen. My fingers curled around it with a steadiness that surprised even me. Lydia leaned forward as if she could stop me by sheer force of will. "Margaret," she whispered sharply, "think about the consequences." "I am," I said. "For the first time in a long time, I am thinking only of the consequences." The pen touched the paper. The stroke was slow, deliberate. My name, my real name, not the one they had scribbled on stolen documents, took its rightful place. When I finished, I set the pen down. Andrew exhaled shakily. "So, what happens now?" I looked at both of them, my voice steady as stone. "Now," I said, "the distance begins." Lydia's eyes filled, not with remorse, but with indignation, the twisted belief that she had been wronged. Andrew closed his eyes as if bracing himself for a world in which he no longer had access to my life, my money, my quiet compliance. Arthur gathered the documents. "Mrs. Hale," he said softly, "you've taken the correct steps. You've protected yourself." "Yes," I murmured, "and now I will protect my peace." For the first time since they arrived, I stood. My knees protested, but I did not waver. Lydia and Andrew watched me as if seeing a stranger. No, not a stranger. A woman they had underestimated for far too long. I walked to the doorway, my voice calm but absolute. You may stay for dessert, I said, but you may not stay for discussion. The conversation is over. It was the first boundary I had drawn in years, and it held. They didn't stay for dessert. I wasn't surprised. Lydia was the first to rise, her chair scraping sharply against the floor, a graceless, indignant sound that told me more about her than any apology ever could. She didn't look back as she left the dining room, heels striking the hardwood like accusations. Andrew followed more slowly, as if his body were resisting a direction his mind had already accepted. At the doorway, he paused. "Mom?" His voice was soft, unfamiliar. I I didn't know how far things had gone. I should have paid more attention." "You should have listened," I said gently. "Listening is the first form of love." He winced, just slightly, but he didn't argue. Maybe for the first time in our lives, he understood he had nothing left to defend. He nodded once, almost a bow, and stepped outside. Lydia was already walking toward the car, arms crossed, face tight with fury she wasn't brave enough to name. The engine started. The doors slammed. The car disappeared down the street. When the silence settled, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Arthur helped me clear the table. He wasn't a man of many words, but he nodded approvingly as I gathered the silverware. "You handled yourself with dignity," he said. "Dignity," I echoed quietly. "It costs more than money, but it lasts longer, too." He smiled at that. Soft? Tired? Two old souls, both of us. He placed the last of the documents into his briefcase and stood by the door. "I'll finalize everything this week," he said. "Account protections, new access rules, a full audit summary for your files." "Thank you, Arthur." He hesitated, his voice lowering. "You didn't deserve any of this." "Most women don't," I said. "But we endure." He squeezed my hand with a warmth that reached a place in me I hadn't known was cold. Then he left, and the house closed softly behind him. When I finally sat down, the exhaustion reached me. Not the physical kind, but something deeper. Betrayal has weight, even when confronted, especially when confronted. I rested my palms on the table where the papers had been laid, where lies had surfaced into truth. My hands shook, not from weakness, but from the release of holding myself so still for so long. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Emily. Grandma, is everything okay? Did the lunch go all right?" "All right." Such a small word for such a heavy day. I typed slowly. "Me." It went as it needed to. Almost immediately, she responded. "Emily, I'm coming over. I don't want you alone tonight." A part of me wanted to tell her not to let her continue her life untouched by the weight of mine. But another part, something older, softer, knew I needed her presence more than I wanted to admit. She arrived within 20 minutes, cheeks flushed from the cold. The moment she stepped inside, the house warmed, as if acknowledging her as something good. She wrapped her arms around me, not gently, but firmly. The embrace of someone who knew I wasn't fragile, even though I was human. "Grandma," she whispered, "I'm so proud of you." Those words, that simple kindness, undid me more than anything Andrew or Lydia had said. I pressed my forehead against her shoulder, my breath unsteady. "I didn't want it to come to this," I murmured. "I know," she said. "But some people leave you no choice." We sat on the couch, a blanket over our laps. She brewed tea, switching the kettle on with the ease of someone who had done it 1,000 times, though she rarely visited as often as she wanted. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that arrives only after a storm. A clean quiet. A healing quiet. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. "You're not alone, Grandma. Whatever happens next, I'm here." I stroked her hair lightly. "I know, my dear. And now that is enough." Outside, the night deepened. The streetlights flickered on, stretching shadows across the yard. I watched them from the window, feeling not forsaken, but free. A day had ended. A life had shifted. And tomorrow would be mine. Finally, quietly, unmistakably mine. Morning came softly, the way forgiveness sometimes does. Not loud, not triumphant, but steady. I woke to the muted light slipping through my curtains, a pale gold that made the room look almost new. Emily had stayed the night in the guest room, though I hadn't asked her to. She said she wanted to make sure I slept. I hadn't realized until then how long it had been since someone cared whether I rested at all. I moved slowly through the house, hand gliding along familiar walls. Nothing had changed, yet everything had shifted. I felt lighter, not younger, age doesn't reverse, but clearer, as if someone had opened a window in a room that had been closed for too many years. The kettle whistled. I poured tea into my favorite mug, the one with the faded blue rim. I sat at the kitchen table where I had first laid out those bank statements, where my fear had turned into certainty. Today was not a day for fear. Today was a day for closure. At 10 o'clock, Arthur arrived. He brought a folder, thin, neat, final. He placed it on the table with the same respect he had shown me from the start. "It's done," he said gently. "Your accounts are frozen to all external access. The protected account is active, the revocations have been filed, and Emily is now your designated contact." I nodded, not with excitement, but with quiet gratitude. "Thank you, Arthur." He hesitated. "If there's anything else—" "There isn't," I said. "Now I simply move on." He smiled in that small, warm way he had. Most people don't handle things with this kind of grace. "Grace," I murmured, "is just the courage to stay still while the truth settles." When he left, Emily came into the kitchen, still in her pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat across from me like she'd been doing it all her life. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "For the first time in a very long time. Yes." She reached across the table, taking my hand. "They'll reach out eventually. Dad will, at least." "If he does," I said, "I'll listen. But I won't let them cross the line again. Some doors need to stay closed until knocking becomes sincere." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "Do you want to see them today?" "No," I said. "Not today." Outside, the wind stirred the last leaves on the maple tree. I watched their soft trembling, and for a moment I felt my own reflection in them. Not fragile, but finished with a season. I spent the afternoon at the bank, signing papers slowly, carefully. The clerks were kind, attentive in a way they hadn't been before, as though they saw me differently now. Or perhaps I simply stood differently, straighter, more certain of the space I occupied. By the time I returned home, the sun was sinking. Emily had cleaned the kitchen, folded blankets, lit a small candle on the mantel. The house felt warm again, mine again. As evening settled, she sat beside me on the couch. "Grandma," she said softly, "you did something brave." I shook my head. "No, my dear. I did something necessary. There's a difference." She leaned her head against my shoulder. We stayed that way until the candle burned low. When she left, the house grew quiet, but not lonely. Quiet like a page turned. Quiet like the breath between chapters. quiet like a woman who knows her worth and does not need permission to keep it. I stood by the window, looking out at the streetlight casting long shadows across the yard. For once, the shadows didn't look like threats. They looked like boundaries. And boundaries can save a life as surely as love can. I whispered, maybe to myself, maybe to the world outside my window. I noticed. I always noticed. And I chose myself. A small truth, spoken softly, yet strong enough to carry me into every tomorrow. And to you, whoever is listening to this old woman's story, let me say this. The one thing I learned too late, but not too late to pass on. Don't wait for someone else to honor your worth. Do it yourself. And if this story touched something in you, leave a sign of your presence. A small gesture, a quiet echo. We all deserve to be heard.